Reading and use of English Part 5 of the advanced exam consists of a long text followed by 6 multiple choice comprehension questions. So let's start by reading the very long text. William Skidelsky reviews David Papineau's new book in which sport meets philosophy. David Papineau is an eminent philosopher and a passionate lover of sport. For much of his life, he has kept the two spheres separate, fearing that to mix them would produce a double negative in his readers' appreciation of his work. Philosophy robbed of its seriousness and sport of its excitement. Then, in 2012, a colleague invited him to contribute to a lecture series titled Philosophy and Sport, organised to coincide with that year's Olympics. I couldn't really refuse, Papineau recalls. I had an extensive knowledge of both philosophy and sport. If I wasn't going to say yes, who would? For this topic, he chose the role of conscious thought in fast reaction sports such as tennis, cricket, and baseball. How, he wondered, do top tennis players like Rafael Nadal and Serena Williams use anything other than automatic reflexes in the half second or less they have to return their opponent's serve? How do they choose to hit the ball this way or that, to apply topspin or slice? Thinking about this not only proved great fun, but allowed Papineau to come away with a series of substantial philosophical conclusions about the relationship between intentions and action. After this, the floodgates were open. Having breached his self-imposed division, Papineau set about applying his philosopher's brain to a range of other sporting topics. 5 years on, those inquiries have resulted in a book, Knowing the Score. This is essentially a collection of essays on whatever sporting questions happen to interest its author. It isn't comprehensive, nor does it advance an overarching argument. The tone, informal, anecdotal, contrarian, is more popular philosophy than academic. What unifies the book is the consistency of its approach rather than of its content. He isn't interested only in applying philosophical ideas and principles to sport. More importantly, and more originally, he wants to use arguments about sport as a launching pad into philosophy. A good example comes in a chapter dealing with rule breaking, in which Papineau sets off with a sporting example in order to draw parallels with broader contexts. He points out that what is acceptable in sport isn't defined by the rules alone. Sometimes it's usual to ignore them, as footballers do when they pull on the opponent's shirts as the ball flies towards them. Other actions stem from a sense of fair play, such as halting the game when an opponent is lying injured, rather than arising directly from the rules. Rules are just one constraint on behaviour. All sports also have codes of fair play, which operate alongside the rules and which, in some cases, override them. Complicating matters further is the fact that official authority ultimately has a force that is greater than both. Whatever a sport's rules or codes specify, the referee or ruling body's decision is final. Papineau argues that there's a remarkably close analogy between sport's multi-level structure and the factors that constrain us in ordinary life. In sport, you can ignore the rules and still play fairly, or obey the law while being thought a cheat. Similarly, in society, citizens can break the law and still do the right thing, or comply with the law, yet still indulge in objectionable behaviour. A sport's codes aren't the same as its rules. Likewise, in life, we draw a distinction between virtue and legal compliance. Papineau argues that we have no general obligation to obey the law, only to do what we think is right. Yet, saying that we are not obliged to obey the law isn't the same as saying that we don't have a duty to respect the state's authority. If people didn't accept that police officers are generally entitled to tell them what to do, society might descend into chaos. Likewise, if footballers stopped listening when referees blow their whistles, the game would become a free-for-all. Knowing the score covers an impressive amount of ground. At a time when data analysis dominates serious discussion of sport, Papinau's faith in the power of anecdote and reasoning is refreshing. The author at times gives the impression of being the sort of person who knows he's the cleverest in the room. For the most part, however, he barely puts a foot wrong in what is a blinder of a performance. Okay, so question number 1 of 6 says, in the first paragraph, the reviewer suggests that Papinau A was in two minds whether to take on the lectures on sport and philosophy. B thought no one was better qualified than him to combine sport and philosophy. C was disappointed with previous attempts to unite sport and philosophy. Or D thought that philosophy was of greater value to people's lives than sport. I'm just going to show you how I found the correct answer. I'm not going to talk about the other possibilities, so if you thought another answer was correct, leave a comment on the video and I'll try to help you out with that. Let's carry on. At the end of the paragraph, we can see he says, I couldn't really refuse, Papinau recalls. I had an extensive knowledge of both philosophy and sport. If I wasn't going to say yes, who would? So he thinks he knows a lot about sport and philosophy, and that if he couldn't do it, then nobody could, is the suggestion. So the answer is B. Papinau thought that no one was better qualified than him to combine sport and philosophy. Okay, so number 2. What does the reviewer say Papinau gained through delivering his lecture series? A. Knowledge of how automatic reflexes suppress conscious thought in many situations. B. Insight into the steps involved when sports stars have to make choices under pressure. C. Understanding of the connections between people's aims and what they subsequently do. Or D. Awareness of why sports stars' reactions are superior to those of ordinary people. So we can see in the second paragraph, again towards the end, it says that thinking about this allowed Papinau to come away with a series of substantial philosophical conclusions about the relationship between intentions and action. Philosophical conclusions, or understanding of the relationship or the connections between people's intentions or aims and action or what they do. The answer is C. Okay, so number 3. What point is made about Papinau's book in the third paragraph? A. It examines previously overlooked aspects of sport. B. Its style is inappropriate for the subject matter. C. It doesn't convincingly link sport and philosophy. Or D. The areas of sport that it covers are very diverse. Well, there are several clues throughout this paragraph as to which is the correct answer. But in the third line, Papinau set about applying his philosopher's brain to a range of other sporting topics. That's the first clue. This is essentially a collection of essays on whatever sporting questions happen to interest its author. And then towards the end, a more subtle clue, it says what unifies the book is the consistency of its approach rather than of its content, which suggests that its content is very varied and not unified, which tells us that the answer is clearly D. The areas of sport that it covers are very diverse. Number 4. What does the reviewer suggest in the 4th paragraph? A. Breaking rules should be punished more consistently by those in power. B. Rules play only a partial role in defining what is appropriate or inappropriate. C. Many sportsmen and women abuse situations which lack a clear set of rules. Or D. Codes of fair play carry more weight with sports stars than official rules. Well, I think this one is fairly clear because we have lots of examples in this paragraph which tell us what the answer is. So he points out that what is acceptable in sports isn't defined by the rules alone. Sometimes we ignore rules. Other times rules come from a sense of fair play rather than directly from the rules. Rules are just one constraint on our behavior. There's also codes of fair play which run alongside the rules. Sometimes they override them. And then, complicating matters further, is the fact that the authority ultimately has force over a greater force than both. So a referee or a ruling body can override the rules or the protocol. Basically, in the whole paragraph, what is being said here is that written rules are just one way in which we are informed as to how to behave. So the answer is B. Rules play only a partial role in defining what is appropriate or inappropriate. Okay, number 5 of 6. In the 5th paragraph, the reviewer draws a comparison between behavior in sport and A. A broad system of morality in society, B. A deep respect for authority in society, C. People's tolerance of reasonable laws, or D. Society's attitudes towards rule breakers. Well, again, in various parts of the paragraph, we can start to see the answer. I think the first sentence, really. Papineau argues that there is a remarkably close analogy between sports' multi-level structure and factors that constrain us in ordinary life. So what he's saying there is the various things that influence how a sportsman or sportswoman behaves in a particular sport is similar to how we operate in our normal everyday lives. And they go on to explain towards the end of the paragraph that what might seem contrarian is that in sport you can ignore the rules and still play fairly or obey the law while being thought a cheat. Similarly, in society, citizens can break the law and still do the right thing, or comply with the law and still indulge in objectionable behavior. Basically, what is being said is that it's not always very clear where we get our values from, and that a lot of different factors, not only written laws or rules, influence how we decide what is moral, what is correct. However, what is correct here is very clear. It's A, that in the 5th paragraph, the reviewer draws a comparison between behavior in sports and a broad system of morality in society. Good. Okay, let's have a look at number 6. The final question. In the final paragraph, the reviewer says that Papineau A uses too lightweight an approach to deal with philosophical issues. B relies overly on significant detail to support his opinions. C comes across as somewhat arrogant in various parts of the book. Or D chooses some poor examples to illustrate points he's making. About halfway through the paragraph, we see that the reviewer says, the author at times gives the impression of being the sort of person who knows he is the cleverest in the room. So that means that sometimes Papineau comes across as somewhat arrogant in various parts of the book. Yes, we've finished reading and use of English Part 5. But wait! There is a bonus round. Oh, this is going to be fun. Choose the correct alternative to complete these sentences. Okay, so maybe you want to pause the video here and have a look at them in detail. If not, I'm just going to read the correct answers now, and I'm not going to explain anything. If you want me to clarify anything, leave a comment on the video. Again, please leave a comment on the video. It helps with the algorithm, and it may just help me to get more views. So think about that. Number 1. He started his talk by pointing out that he had worked as a professional coach. Number 2. Avoiding injury throughout a whole career is, of course, impossible. Number 3. After a few years in the game, players really ought to know what is acceptable behaviour and what is not. Number 4. The team are so far ahead in the league that they really need not worry about today's result. Number 5. When joining a new club, players always undergo a thorough medical examination. Number 6. Everybody was really looking forward to watching the match. Number 7. If you look on the internet, you are bound to find a club near where you live. And number 8. The manager didn't seem to mind me asking him about his team's poor results. So we finished the activities for today. If you have got this far, please like and subscribe. Leave a comment if you've got any questions about what you saw today, and share it with people that might find it useful. All of these things will help me, and you want to help me. I know you do. So do that, please.